Members, good morning. This is the meeting of the Subcommittee on Students' Rights. It's time and we have a quorum because we need only 5 members to form a quorum. So we have more than 5 members present, so I can call to order the meeting. First item on the agenda, election of chairman. In accordance with the electoral procedures in Appendix 4 of the House Rules, may I now invite nominations for the chairmanship. A valid nomination must be made verbally by one member and seconded by at least another member. And the nomination must be accepted by the nominee for the nomination to be valid. Mr. Kim Yoon, I nominate Dr. Fernando Cheung. Dr. Kokaki, I second the nomination. So Mr. Kim Yoon nominates and Dr. Kokaki seconds. Dr. Fernando Cheung, do you accept the nomination? I do. Are there any other nominations, please? So I will count to 3 then. 1, 2, 3. Okay, there are no other nominations. Congratulations, Dr. Fernando Cheung. You are elected chairman of the subcommittee. Can I now invite you to come over here and preside over the meeting? Thank you, members. We will consider whether we wish to elect a deputy chairman. I suppose we do. Dr. Kokaki, I nominate Mr. Shu Ka-chun. Okay. Dr. Kwok has nominated Mr. Ka-chung. Any seconder? Mr. Ip Kin Yoon seconds nomination. Mr. Shu, do you accept the nomination? I do. Are there other nominations, please? Are there other nominations, please? I don't see any. I'll count to 3 then. 1, 2, 3. No other nominations. So Mr. Shu Ka-chun is elected the deputy chairman of the subcommittee. Mr. Shu, do you wish to come over here? No? Okay. Next. Now the Secretariat reminded me that for some items for discussion, they have been considered in the past. So we'll be handing out the list of items for discussion. And Unison has written to us to propose certain agenda items on children of ethnic minorities. Perhaps we could consider their views as well. The next meeting will be on the 19th of December at 10:45. It's a Monday. Members, is this fine with you? The 19th of December, Monday at 10:45 a.m. Perhaps it clashes with the panel of the PS panel, perhaps? No? Okay, if there are no questions, and we will set the date for the next meeting for the 19th of December, and we will have regular meetings. Yes, Mr. Kwok Wai Kang. Well, I'm the chairman of the PS panel. If you call the meeting exactly 10:45, I can't even attend. Is it possible to advance it a bit? In that case, let's find another slot. So we're trying to find another slot. The Secretariat will inform us then of the meeting schedule. Now, I would expect us to hold a meeting once every month, regularly. And the rule is that the subcommittee will be in operation for a year, so we have a year, in other words. Members, do you have any objection to holding monthly meetings? If not, then we will do so. And the Secretariat will propose the meeting schedule for the full year, having regard to members' commitments, okay? And if you wish to propose any items for discussion, you're welcome to do so. For the December meeting, we will have to inform you of the date. But I have some initial ideas. Now, we are very much concerned about disadvantaged children, especially those with special background. That is, children in families with drug abuse problem. This could be a serious problem. Well, there's a 15-year-old Down syndrome child who died as a result of poisoning by psychotropic substance because someone in that household is a drug abuser. So I would suggest that we take up this item in the December meeting. That is disadvantaged children in households with a drug abuse problem. I agree. Do we need a public hearing? Yes, we could hold a public hearing. Then, so for social workers and reference stakeholders, they could come and give their views. Okay, so at the next meeting, we will consider this item and hold a public hearing on it. Any other views, please? Mr. Leung Yu-chung? Now, of course, other panels may discuss issues related to children. For example, children's suicide. That's something we must consider. And SEN students, how do we take better care of them? Of course, some other panels may consider these issues as well, but that will be just one-off on their agenda, not like us, we have regular meetings. So can we include these items, and we should allow the concerned groups and parents to come and give their views. We need a more in-depth discussion at this subcommittee. Yes, thank you. Mr. Leung, is a good idea. Because well, it's most likely that there could be duplication with welfare services panel, health services panel, or even education panel. But for this subcommittee, the focus is on children's right. And we have a full year to do our work, so we could focus on children's right. And let's say if we talk about certain item, for example, today Mr. Leung Yu-chung has already proposed 2 or 3 items, and then we could talk to the relevant panel. Maybe it's better if we have some coordination, because we would like to avoid duplication as far as possible. Mr. Siu Ka-chun is the deputy chairman of this committee, and he's the chairman of the Welfare Service Panel. And then Mr. Yip Kin Yoon is the deputy chairman of the Education Panel. I'm sure that we could have some form of coordination. Dr. Kwakaki, well, Mr. Leung referred to an item. Reminds me of the Community Care Fund supporting a pilot study on preschool children. Well, I don't agree that should be the long-term approach, but we no longer has the other subcommittee, so that is. But I would like to include this item because, you know, the money they put into that project is just a drop in the bucket. It's not going to last. You mean the preschool rehabilitation service? A pilot scheme, right? Yes, because we're talking about children with special education, special needs. Mr. Siu Ka-chun, for the there is a major review on the youth center, and of course the sector is very much concerned about it. It affects the development of youth. On the welfare services panel, we probably couldn't include that item, so I'm not worried about duplication. I like to propose an item that is the way forward for integrated youth centers, or integrated youth and children centers. yes, children are those under 18, maybe that's overlapping age range between youth and children. Well, yes, I think many of us don't know what is the definition of children. You just mentioned is age under 18. Okay, now the education panel, of course, will always look at issues relating to children. We've always proposed there should be a children's commission covering different departments. So I think that's one item we should consider. And the chairman is, of course, concerned about children with a disadvantage. But apart from disadvantaged children, children in general in Hong Kong face various difficulties and challenges. The play opportunities, the voices of children, and so on. I think we need to look at the overall well-being of children, their mental and physical well-being. I think we should look into that. Yes, that's also a good suggestion. In other panels, it's not easy for us to talk about the well-being of children, because now we see children these days don't have time to play or even to sleep. They have no time to do things they enjoy. So I think this is the right forum to consider such issues. Mr. Alvin Young, the Law Reform Commission has recently put forward some recommendations about children and reforms in relation to sex-related issues. I wonder if we could consider it in this forum. I understand many other members have suggested concrete items for discussion. Of course, we know with just a year it's not enough time to cover so many different items. But I wonder if the HLS panel may have enough time to consider that item, because that's a law reform proposal with far-reaching implications. So I hope very much that this committee should consider it as well. Maybe we could have a joint meeting with the AJS panel or something like that. Yes, it's true. This is an important item. The consultation report has been published recently, and we see that a part of the report has to do with sex offences involving children. So I will coordinate with the HLS panel. Perhaps we could either have a joint meeting or they call meeting, or we call meeting, and then invite members of each other to join the discussion. It's good we do it now because the consultation is ongoing. Dr. Helena Wong. Childcare service and nursery service. Because I want to discuss that, because children need care when they're really young, especially for toddlers between the age of 0 to 2. There's a serious shortage of nursery service. Now, I know we're going to have free kindergarten education, but what about the group in the age range of 0 and 2? They don't receive assistance from the government. So I think we need to review that. We talk about children being under the age of 18. That means all of them are still in school. I think we should look at the quality of school life. For students, what is the school environment like? What is the learning environment like? I think we need to review that. Is childcare service and nursery service? Yes, there's an urgency in that. We know there is a strong demand in the community, but the supply is far from sufficient. So I think we need to consider it at this subcommittee. And for schools, what is school life like? What is the arrangement for children? I think, yes, we should consider it from the point of view of children. maybe we can coordinate with the education panel. If the education panel is going to discuss it, then maybe we could join them in a discussion. If they won't take it up, then maybe we'll include it on our list.
Mr. Shuka-chun, I'd like to talk about childcare and nursery services. At the panel welfare services, there's an agenda item on childcare policy review. So we might touch upon this issue. So we can do something together. As for school life, I completely agree. There are 3 areas we can look into. First of all, school disaffection. A lot of students don't want to go to school, so we have to know what their school lives look like. So we can look into school disaffection. And there are 2 other areas we can discuss. First, the maximum amount of time spent on homework. This is a contentious issue, but it's also worth discussing. So we should set a cap on the amount of time spent on homework. Another issue is a concept called start school later, which has been advocated overseas. So we can go to school later at 9 a.m. or 9:30 a.m. So is this something we can discuss? Some groups in Hong Kong advocate similar concepts, so this is worth discussing. So we can work with the panel on education. If there's not much room for discussion at the panel, then we can discuss it at a subcommittee. Mr. Ted Hui, thank you. I'm more interested in hardware and community planning related to education. I'm more interested about recreational facilities and whether there's any policy, as well as barrier-free facilities in the community for children. We should be up to standard so that our children can live comfortably. So in terms of planning and hardware, I think we should discuss policy issues at this subcommittee. This is important as well. In the past, there have been concerns on whether recreational facilities can match the needs of children as well as children with disabilities. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, I want to follow up on what Mr. Shuka-chun said. And there would be after-school activities for children, but there have been complaints from the community that the subsidy on extracurricular activities is inadequate. I'm not sure whether this should be discussed here or at the education panel. We have been talking about this issue for a number of years, but the government has not made much progress. So can we have another discussion? At the panel on constitutional affairs, we talked about the report submitted by the government to the UNCPR. Should we discuss the details of this report as well as the relevant framework? This is important because it would affect the government's work in terms of the UNCRC. Can we have in-depth discussions? This is a good suggestion. At the CA panel and HA panel, we have discussed this in the past. At the we have discussed these issues in 2005 and 2012, respectively, at these 2 panels. Whether this should be discussed at this subcommittee or the CA panel, we would work it out with them. As for extracurricular activities, I agree it's important. Community-based and school-based subsidies are known to be inadequate, so we would work with the education panel on where this should be addressed. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, At the education panel, deputations do not have much chance to speak, but at this subcommittee, we can invite concerned groups to attend and tell us what they think. So I think the nature is a bit different. I agree that we can hold more open hearings because we have more time here. Though we do have a lot of items on the agenda already, some issues might not be discussed well at a panel level, so this would be we can discuss it at the SC. As Mr. Shiu suggested, the welfare panel can talk about the policy, but for children aged 0 to 2, we must invite deputations and parents to share their views. A lot of them have to start queuing up as soon as they are pregnant, otherwise they cannot secure a place. So why is this problem so serious? So open hearings are very important for us to identify solutions. Mr. Andrew Wan. Thank you. I agree with the issues mentioned by other members on children's rights. However, I think the subcommittee should focus on the government's execution on the UNCRC and whether they are implementing what they promise in the report. So this would be a more appropriate approach. As Mr. Chiu just suggested, we can look at things like the maximum amount of time spent on homework, but as the convention suggested, children should develop in different ways. There should be time for play. Unfortunately, in Hong Kong, due to the system and the philosophies of parents, because of the system, some rights of children have been deprived. So I agree with Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. We should see whether the government's work on the convention could be implemented. The scope is very wide, so we might have to follow up on various issues at other panels, but at least we should have an overall review. This would make a clear framework to follow up on the implementation of the convention in Hong Kong and whether the items in the report have been implemented. So these are worth discussing. Any other suggestions? Dr. Elena Wong. If we have time, we should invite the administration to talk about children who suffer high levels of lead in their blood level because of the lead and water incidents. They should share the details. The government has never disclosed their conditions, and these children have been ignored. I'd like to know the progress of the follow-up work and whether these children have seen any improvements and whether they are taken care of. I hope the administration can report the progress to us. We would include this on the agenda. The clerk also reminded us of a suggestion from the Hong Kong Unison on ethnic minorities. They want us to talk about the policy on 15 years of free education and Chinese as a second language. They want to talk about the learning of Chinese by ethnic minorities in mainstream schools and the relevant support. And whether admissions from schools still implement a form of ethnic segregation. In some schools, the ratio of EM students is high. So they want to know about the situation of ethnic minority students in schools. We might have to work with the education panel. We have another subcommittee on ethnic minorities. If we already have a very full agenda, we should work with the subcommittee on ethnic minorities so that they can take up items relating to EMs. The Hong Kong Unison suggested a number of items on the agenda, so the three subcommittees should work with one another to see how we can distribute the work. At our subcommittee, we should embrace the principle of children's rights. The clerk reminded us that the subcommittee on the rights of EMs would discuss the teaching of Chinese as a second language in November, so we don't have to follow up on that here. Any other suggestions? If not, the meeting is adjourned. Excuse me, Mr. Shek. I'm not a member of the subcommittee, but I'm interested in your work. In the previous term, I did participate. Chairman, I suggest not to separate these two. The other subcommittee might not be able to cover the rights of children. Children should not be divided into different ethnicities. We shouldn't make any distinguishment. They should also be included. Each child should enjoy equal rights to education and other issues. So they should have these rights. These are my views. I'm not a member, but I would attend the meetings. We welcome your participation. I agree that we should discuss children's rights as much as we can. If we cannot even protect children, then the council would be pointless. So I agree with you, Mr. Shek. Mr. Alvin Young, I agree with Mr. Shek. But technically speaking, discussions would be conducted at the SC on ethnic minorities. They have other items on the agenda as well. As for teaching Chinese as a second language or the education policy, if they don't have enough time for discussions, or if we require more detailed discussions, we can take it up. This is a good suggestion. If some items have been discussed at the education panel and subcommittee on EM's rights, and if some items could not be completed, then we would take up the remaining work. And we can offer time for NGOs to share their views. Any other suggestions? If not, the meeting's adjourned. Let's meet again in December on children in families with a background of drug abuse.